We're going to have a look at some highlights of Brooklyn, New York. We'll be taking you downtown. It's a surprisingly vital urban place. And we're going to look at the bridge, the famous Brooklyn Bridge. There are plenty of boats going by and things to see in this busy place. Then take a walk along the Riverside Park with beautiful views looking out towards Manhattan across the East River. And as we get further from the bridge along the walkway, you can see the entire span of the bridge. Then finally, we'll take you on a walk through Brooklyn Heights. Its cobblestone streets and old brick buildings makes this one of the most enjoyable historic neighborhoods of New York City. You can easily get to downtown Brooklyn from Manhattan by subway, or if you are already in Brooklyn, you can take a city bus to get there. Just get off at the Fulton Street Mall, which runs through the very center of downtown Brooklyn. Right away, you're going to notice some new, very tall buildings. This has been a major change recent years in Brooklyn, which for such a long time had seen very little development. But in the last decade, there has been a building boom. Downtown has become once again a very vital place, filled with hundreds of stores and restaurants and always lots of people out on the streets. People are on the move, walking along, eating their slice of pizza, talking on the phone, drinking coffee, carrying on. A city in motion. This intersection of J Street and Willoughby is a particularly lively part of downtown, with all of the shops around it and big signs up, pizza everywhere. It seems like that's the dish of choice in Brooklyn downtown. It's wonderful to see how they've created sidewalk tables by carving a lane out of the street and putting planter boxes around to protect it, a phenomenon that was started some years ago in Manhattan along Broadway and Times Square, and now it's spreading throughout the city. It really helps to make the place a lot more livable and user-friendly for the residents and shoppers. In some ways, downtown Brooklyn has an even more authentic urban feeling than many parts of Manhattan, which have gotten extremely expensive and upscale. From the J Street Metrotech subway station, you can take the A, C, or F trains to get back into Manhattan, which you can reach in a couple of stops. However, when you're downtown Brooklyn, there are several more really fascinating sights to see, including the Brooklyn Bridge, a lovely park along the East River, and Brooklyn Heights. You might think the best route for getting to Brooklyn Bridge is along the Brooklyn Bridge Boulevard, a rather straight line. However, it's not very scenic. This is a wide, busy street with lots of trucks and cars going by and not much to look at. A much better alternative route is a stroll through the charming residential historic neighborhood of Brooklyn Heights. You'll be walking along quiet streets sheltered by trees, lined with old, beautiful brownstone apartment buildings. Montague is the main commercial street of the neighborhood, with many shops and restaurants and cafes, so that's a good way to get into Brooklyn Heights for a few blocks. Then turn up Henry Street for 1 block. From Pierpont Street, turn up Willow Street. That'll take you right through the center of this lovely neighborhood. This area has been a prominent section of Brooklyn since 1834. It's noted for low-rise architecture and the many brownstone row houses. Most of them were built prior to the Civil War. Along Hicks Street, you'll find a few shops, cafes, and taverns. We'll see more of Brooklyn Heights at the end of the video. It's a little tricky to exit the neighborhood because of the expressway on the west edge that you cannot cross, but turn left on Midas Street and you can go through the playground and you'll come out on Columbia. It'll take you right down to Brooklyn Bridge. Constructed about 140 years ago and still going strong. It's a beautiful sight, and from the foot of the bridge, you get spectacular views looking across the East River at the Manhattan skyline. Before walking along the Brooklyn Bridge Park, you might want to stock up on some food. There are some nice little eateries right here at the foot of the bridge, including a world-famous ice cream shop in a former firehouse called Brooklyn Ice Cream Factory. They line up outside for a block on a hot summer day. Quiet during the month of March. The bridge is a cable stay suspension bridge spanning the East River between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Opened in 1883, it was the first bridge across the East River, physically connecting Long Island with Brooklyn on its west end to Manhattan. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world at that time, with a main span of about 1,600 feet. Of course, the view of Lower Manhattan across the East River is one of the main attractions of taking a stroll along this Brooklyn Bridge Park, with a classic look at the financial district skyscrapers. The original ferry service started here in 1642, and boats have been coming and going ever since. It's called Fulton Ferry Landing because Robert Fulton brought his first steamships here in 1814, beginning the earliest steamship ferry service. Brooklyn Bridge Park is relatively new. The first portion opened in 2010 and has been expanding ever since. The land for the park was formerly an industrial stretch of waterfront owned by the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Back in the 1950s and 60s, there were over 100 warehouses and 25 smaller piers along the waterfront. In 1984, after closing of the cargo ship operations, Port Authority sold the vacant piers, and most of them were later demolished to form the park. Several new piers were constructed out over the river, extending the usable area. The park's master plan includes sporting courts for basketball, volleyball, kayaking areas, the waterfront promenade, and playgrounds, along with landscape features such as hills, open plazas, and marshes. The very busy Brooklyn-Queens Expressway runs alongside the park, constructed cleverly in 3 levels. At the top is the famous Brooklyn Heights Promenade, and then 2 levels for the freeway. There are not many exits from the park because of that freeway blockage, but a good one is on Girolamo Street that'll take you right underneath the freeway and into Brooklyn Heights. This is an affluent residential neighborhood with housing prices that have skyrocketed in recent decades. Brooklyn Heights really began to develop in the early 1800s, especially when Robert Fulton's steamboat ferry service began, which made it easier and faster to get to Manhattan than commuting from Upper Manhattan by ground transportation. It was mostly farmland until 1823 when it was subdivided, leading to a building boom. By 1860, there were over 600 houses, and by 1890, the area was almost completely developed. This concentration of over 600 pre-Civil War houses is one of the largest collections of such housing in the nation, creating a human scale that still survives with low-rise buildings in a neighborly atmosphere. Completion of the Brooklyn Bridge in 1883 made the neighborhood more accessible from Manhattan, and then the IRT subway line reached Brooklyn Heights in 1908. This was a powerful catalyst in the neighborhood's development. Tranquility was threatened in the 1950s when plans were proposed by the master builder Robert Moses to replace brownstone row houses with large luxury apartment buildings. Moses also proposed to build the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway through the middle of Brooklyn Heights. Opposition to this plan led to the rerouting of the expressway to the side of the bluff, allowing creation of the promenade, and this stimulated community activism to protect the neighborhood in its entirety. The preservationist movement succeeded with the passage in 1965 of the Landmarks Preservation Law. The neighborhood was designated the Brooklyn Heights Historic District by the Landmark Preservation Commission. It was the first such district in the city, and that protected it from unchecked development. The district was later added to the National Register of Historic Places. Gentrification in the following decades ensured that the Heights became one of New York City's most pleasant and attractive neighborhoods. The entire walking route in this video is just over 4 miles, starting from downtown up to the bridge along the park and then through Brooklyn Heights. So this is something you could conveniently do in a day or even half a day if that's all the time you've got. When you have completed your explorations of this fine neighborhood, it's very easy to get back to Manhattan if that's where you're going. You can get on the R train at the Court Street station. conveniently located on the street you came in on, Montague Street. We frequently upload new movies, so please subscribe to our channel and click that little alarm bell so you'll be notified. And if you enjoyed the movie, how about a thumbs up? And we always welcome comments down below. Or if you have questions about the destination, make note and we'll answer them. Thanks for watching.